all for being here today. Thank you guys all for being here today for our first education class. I'm really excited to be teaching this class. This is my first class that I'm teaching this year, and for future classes, I might be teaching, or we might have a presenter come in and teach on a topic that they're experts in. So yeah, for this class specifically, we will be, the purpose of this class is kind of familiarizing ourselves with the 9 different crop families, and kind of assist you in deciding what crops you're wanting to plant this year and for the season. In addition, we'll be talking a little bit about different types of planting, like intercropping, companion planting, and then we're going to get more into the plot planning and mapping of your plots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the 9 different crop families, and if you do have any questions, I will stop after each crop family and take a pause and see if you guys have any questions. And I know that this will be kind of a lot of information coming in, and I just want you to know that we will be giving you the presentation slides and everything, so don't feel like you have to write everything down or memorize everything. You will have these resources, and you will be getting your education binder, I think, next week. Is that correct? Okay. And you'll have some resources in there. So you will have a sheet about and just a little bit of housekeeping too before I get started, to make sure that your microphone is on mute. So that's going to be in the left bottom corner of your screen. There is a little microphone, and you just want to click on that, and it will put a slash in the microphone, and that means that you're on mute. And again, if you do have any questions throughout this presentation, you can put your questions in the chat, or unmute yourself, and you can ask questions throughout the presentation. Yeah. And so I think I was explaining before, you will be getting resources in your education binder, and you can refer to those. So let's get started familiarizing ourselves with the crop families. I thought that we could kind of start, there we go. So I'm just going to kind of lay out the meeting format for us. So exploring similarities between our families and crop families. So doing a little bit of a reflection activity, grounding us in this presentation. And then we're going to move into really getting to know the different crop families, and you will be getting in your binder a crop families handout, and you can refer to that throughout the season. It will be very, very helpful for you to really get to know and familiarize yourselves with these different plant families. So we're going to talk a little bit about what makes them special and introducing them, and then we're going to move into different types of planting, like intercropping and companion planting. I did give you guys a resource, and that was in the invitation. There was a companion planting sheet that I sent you. So if you're not really familiar with companion planting, there was a resource that was a part of that invitation that you can kind of refer back to if companion planting is something that you feel like you're wanting to do with your farm, with your garden plot, or not garden plot, farm plot, sorry. And then we're going to move into plot planning and mapping. And then May will be going over some ways to do some seed searching. And then we're also going to be familiarizing ourselves with how to read seed packets, and kind of learning more about where you should buy your seeds, because since we are certified, since Big River Farms is a certified organic farm, we do want to make sure that you are keeping record of the seeds that you're purchasing, that they are certified organic. So we will be going over that a little bit. And let me just think. This is also, so I will be kind of touching base a little bit when we're familiarizing ourselves with the crop families. I will be touching base a little bit on pests and diseases with some of these crop families, but I'm not going to dive super far into pests and diseases for this class. We will have a separate class on pests and diseases. So if you do have questions about that, if you want to learn more about that, we'll have a totally separate section on pests and diseases and how to manage them. And yeah, so let's get started here. So I was thinking we could just kind of ground ourselves in this activity, kind of understanding more about how our families relate with crop families and how connected we are with plants. And so what makes our families special? Genes, our cultures, our different cultures, history, personalities, behaviors, similarities and differences in that, diseases and health, environment, what environment and climate you come from, fertility, offsprings, next generations, the seeds. A lot of these are very similar to what we see in crop families. And so here's some really beautiful pictures that these are Kajua's pictures that she took. This is her daughter down here in the left corner. So what makes the plant families special is just how they grow. They all grow very differently, but also similarly. So as we can see down here, I think this is a zucchini plant. You know, the zucchini plant is going to be, it's going to spread out a lot. It's going to have the vining and need a lot more space than maybe like our spinach plants over here that are part of the aster family. And then we have the space that they need, so like kind of what I was addressing here. So this is some Brussels sprouts, and then we can see right here that the melons, they really need a lot of space to grow and spread out. And then the seasons and temperatures. So as we can see right here, some of our Brassica plant families, they're very cold tolerant. They're able to handle more of the colder temperatures, whereas our nightshade families, our tomatoes, our peppers, they really love the warmth, and they do a lot better in warmer climates, warmer weather. And then, so some of the pests that plant families deal with are going to be different, but most of the plants crops do deal with different pests. And then the nutrient needs vary with each plant family. And then also, of course, the taste and smells. And yeah, and then the seeds, the offsprings, the babies, these are all going to be, so all of the crop families, you know, they do have seeds and offsprings, but they're all different and unique. And then also their ability to give back to its environment and its neighbors. So giving back to our pollinators, and also many plants bring different nutrients in the soil for other plants to benefit from. Yeah, so that's a little bit about what makes them special. So now we're going to move into the Brassica family, the cold tolerant family. So the Brassica family makes up your broccoli, your cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, collards, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, your Asian greens like your mustards, mizuna, arugula, bok choy, radishes, and turnips. So yeah, I really love the Brassica family. It's really fun to have more of a cold tolerant family in your farm, in your plot, especially seeing like kale. Sometimes kale can last beyond the fall. It will be growing in November, and still you can still be harvesting from it with the snow even on the ground. So yeah, these plants are very unique, very hardy. And as you can see, these are the roots of the Brassica family. They're really shallow rooted. So only 8 to 12 inches below the soil. So these plants do need a little bit more water. And you know, when you buy like cabbage or cauliflower, broccoli, they do contain a lot of water. And so yeah, they just do need to be watered a little bit more regularly because they are shallow rooted. So keep that in mind. A little bit of an introduction. Like I was saying, they are cool season crops. So they're best when grown in temperatures of 55 degrees to 70 degrees. And most can handle a light frost. And they don't grow very well in the heat. So the high heat and the longer days can speed up the flowering, or the premature flowering called bolting, which can create a bitter taste in the crop. And I'll address more on kind of when to plant and when to harvest the brassicas. So direct seed or transplant. So the brassicas that you're going to want to transplant are going to be your radishes, your turnips, your mustard greens, and your arugula, if that is something that you're wanting to grow in your plot. Direct seeding is just, they're better for plants that are going to be quick germinators, like these plants. And you might do multiple plantings of them throughout the season. And they also have really delicate root systems. So sometimes it's just better to direct seed plants versus transplanting them. But these ones on the right side are going to be the ones that you're going to want to transplant. So your broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, and bok choy. So those are the ones that you're going to want to start in the greenhouse and then transplant them in the spring. And they are heavy feeders, meaning that they need a lot of nutrients than most other plant families. So you know, providing them with a little bit more compost and extra nutrients in the soil will really help them. It will help hold moisture in the soil as well a little bit better, since they do like a little bit more moisture. And then they do well with a little extra nitrogen boost early in their growing season. So I would just say adding a little bit of compost when in your soil, or also when you're transplanting, you can put a little bit of compost in the hole that you're transplanting it in, and that will really help your brassicas out. Some common pests that are common with brassicas are the flea beetle. So they'll kind of leave little holes in the leaves. And like I said, I'm not going to go super far into depth about pests and diseases. That will be a completely separate class. And another common disease is the cabbage loper. And this will also leave little holes in the leaves of the plant. And they're very common with, of course, cabbage and broccoli. And there's going to be, so you're going to have pests. When you're practicing organic farming, you're just going to have pests, and you're going to have to find different unique ways to manage them. And it's just a part of farming. You know, you're going to have pests, you're going to have different things come up, but yeah, and we'll have a separate class on this and talk more a little bit in depth about how to manage that organically. So then, yeah, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the harvest window and number of plantings for brassicas. So many of these plants have a 2-week harvest period. Other than kale and collards, they can be harvested for several months throughout the season. So so many of these other plants, besides kale and collards, once they're matured, they'll have a 2-week harvest period. And then you can do a second planting of them. So you can plant in the spring, harvest in early summer, and then do another planting because since in July, it's going to get, really hot, and then your brassicas aren't going to do as well in that high heat because they'll start to bolt, and then that will change the flavor profile of some of your brassicas. So it does help to do maybe 2 plantings. And then just some more need to know basics on brassicas. So if you are going to be, if you are going to be planting brassicas, you will want to use some row cover for the spring plantings just to give them some extra, what am I trying to say? It's just some extra heat, or yeah, for that spring, because they do need a little bit of cover to protect them from the frost during that early spring, because springs in Minnesota can be pretty unpredictable. Sometimes in May we'll still get snow, but usually with brassicas, they are pretty hardy. You can transplant them in the spring, like April, or like late April, early May. So that's kind of addressed in the next one. So transplant before May 1st and after July 15th. Otherwise, the harvest will be difficult because of the heat, like I was saying. And if you are going to be planting radishes, they will need to be thinned out because you will be direct seeding them. And they typically need to be thinned out so that they have space to grow and enough airflow between them. And then when you do plant your broccoli in the early spring, if it is exposed to too cold of weather, if there is a hard freeze, they will button instead of forming large heads, meaning that they're going to be a lot smaller. So just keep that in mind. You will be wanting to check the weather before you're planting. Let's see, I think, okay, so I'm just going to stop right here, pause for a second. Are there any questions at all about brassicas?
Becca, we do have a question in the chat. Devin asked what types of row cover?
So I will say the row cover that I'm most familiar with is Agribon. I'm not sure if we provide row cover or if that is something that the farmers need to provide for themselves.
Pierce or May, do we know kind of what kinds of row cover we provide, and or if we provide?
May, do you want to take it? Yeah.
Sure, you can go ahead.
Okay, well, yeah, add anything if I miss it. Yeah, so for row cover, we I think we do have some in the farm store that's available to purchase for the season. I think the specific type that we have, I think it is the Agribon brand. I think it's like Ag 19 is like the thickness of it. I think if you get under that like 19 number, then that's more so for insect netting that kind of keeps the insects out. But the Ag 19, that is one of the types that will help keep the heat in for your brassicas.
Awesome.
Oh, May, do you have anything to add?
I did not. You already covered, and so
Okay.
yeah, you already covered everything, and so yeah, we do have in the farm store. Yeah.
Okay.
And Matt also added a comment in the chat. He said, I know we've had flea beetle issues recently, and there's been discussion from Big River Farm staff about not planting brassicas in the spring due to better manage pests. And he was asking if there's any thoughts from the operations team. So Pearson May about that. And Emilio.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that one. It's yeah, about the past. Then yeah, we do. I think we're gonna have class about past, and so that time that we can talk about more about cover roll.
Mhm. Okay.
I want to mention also that we are going to monitoring the plants, the crops that each farmer is going to have in the field. So that is going to have an information if we need to improve the methodologies in cropping. So if we need to rotate more or less, or which plants we need to rotate, I think we are going to have a database to monitoring that in a future.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Any other questions? Oops. All right. We can move on to cucurbits. This is one of my favorite families. So this family contains the cucumbers, summer squash, winter squash, pumpkins, zucchini, melons, and gourds. These are going to be your heat-loving plants. And yeah, and so let's just, yeah, introduction to them. So all members of this family, like I said, they need frost-free weather. So make sure to plant these after the final frost. And if they are planted, if the seeds are direct seeded in cooler soils with too much water, they will rot. So the root system is, so they have a classic taproot, and it can reach 18 to 36 inches deep, meaning that they're able to handle more drier periods and retain moisture deeper in the soil. So it is important to water these plants really deeply, but they're able to yeah, handle drier periods. So if there is maybe a drought during the summer, sometimes, you know, summers can also be kind of unpredictable. I know last year there was a little bit of a drought during the growing season, but sometimes it rains a lot. So it's a little hard to know, but just keep that in mind. So direct seed or transplant cucurbits. All the seeds can be started by seed in the field, but like I said, they do need warm soil. And if it is, if the soil is cool and too moist, the seeds will begin to rot. I do believe that it is a big advantage to transplant them. So starting them in the greenhouse and then transplanting them, because you will get an earlier harvest. You have a little bit more control and predictability over your plants when you're starting them in the greenhouse. Yeah, it also reduces like pest pressure and disease if you do transplant your cucurbits. And they also have really delicate roots, so it does help to transplant them because the root systems will stay more intact. And a little bit about the soil and fertility. And another thing is that for this class, we're not going to be delving super far into soil health and fertility. That's going to be another separate class, but just to familiarize ourselves with these crop families and what they need. So they do well with a fertilizer that has lots of potassium and phosphorus, but too much nitrogen can cause the plants to grow well, but they may not bear fruit. And also, I just wanted to note that all the soil inputs that you're thinking about having on your plot should be organic certified and approved by the Big River Farm. So you will be reporting to us about what kind of soil inputs you want, what kind of compost, fertilizers you're thinking about having. Yeah. And then some of the common pests are the cucumber beetle, the vine borer, and the squash bug. So yeah, it is best to use row cover when these plants are smaller to avoid some of these issues. And then some of the common diseases with, that's this right here. Powdery mildew is very, very common. And then the anthracnose, I'm not super familiar with that one, but it does create these brown spots on the leaves and vines. Just to best kind of avoid some of these issues is just to allow a lot of airflow between your plants and making sure that you're weeding regularly. They're not getting too wet. Yeah. And then the harvest window and number of plantings. So cucumber, summer squash, zucchini, and melons, they're going to be producing a lot. Once they're mature, they're just going to continuously produce throughout the season until the first frost. So you will be pretty much swimming in cucumbers and summer squash and zucchini if you are going to be growing those crops. They will need to be, because of this, they will need to be harvested every other day. You can do just one planting in June, which is usually enough. And then it can be followed by a second planting. But I mean, that's up to you if you want to do a second planting, but usually one planting is enough to ensure kind of a continuous harvest until the frost. With winter squash, it's just one planting, one harvest. So you know, planting in June and then harvesting in the fall for the winter squash. So some more need to knows about cucurbits. Like I said, you'll need to harvest pretty much every other day, so keep an eye on them. And do not touch the roots when transplanting. They're very delicate and sensitive. And since these are going to be the plants that are going to need more space than other crops for their vines to grow. And some of them, they do well with trellising to kind of help support them. Sometimes people put tarps underneath their squash plants or their summer or their zucchini plants, just to kind of let them they won't be touching the soil as much, and it will allow them to kind of grow out, and it's easier to harvest them when there is maybe a tarp kind of underneath them, so you can create a hole in the tarp and then plant them in the hole and then have the tarp kind of around them. And let's see, so I think we're going to be moving on to nightshades next. So are there any questions about cucurbits? And I do see that there is a question from Hatham. Hatham, is that how you pronounce your name? So the question is, you mentioned that.
Haitham,
Haitham?
thank you.
Oh, nice
Yep.
to meet you. Okay. So your question is that you mentioned that speeding flowering process leads to bitter taste. Is that applicable to all vegetables? I would say it's most applicable to the brassicas because they are most prone to bolting. And that's my understanding. I don't know if anyone from the operations team wants to add anything additional to that question.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, you mentioned that speeding the flowering process leads to bitter taste. Is that applicable to all vegetables?
Yeah, depend on some of the crop, like mustard green. When they're gonna flower, then they getting old. They're gonna, and the weather really hot, then they gonna taste bitter. But squash, they flower, they still produce like zucchini. But squash, when they done with produce like one vine, then they have one squash or two, then the end gonna be ending. And so, but talk about the squash, then squash when they ripe, then they taste really good. But you did not eat the squash wine, and so it's kind of taste too if you want to cook. But like zucchini is like certain stage, then the taste different. And so, but brassica is gonna be taste different if they flower. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then Matt had also mentioned that the herbs that flower too, like some of the herbs that flower or bolt premature flower, can taste bitter. So that's very true with, like, say, cilantro. Sometimes when it gets too hot, it will start to bolt, and then it will change the flavor profile. So this is also common with some herbs, culinary herbs as well. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay. We can move on.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So how do you know exactly when it's gonna be done before it can be flowers?
So how do you know if it's going to flower?
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
So I would say to kind of best avoid bolting is to just harvest, regularly. And also, yeah, I would just say harvest regularly, harvest when your brassicas are mature, and then you can do a second planting of them later in the summer. So once you've fully harvested some of those brassicas, you can kind of take those ones out and then plant a new row of brassicas once they're stopped producing. And then so yeah, I would just say, keeping up with harvesting is going to really help a lot with the bolting. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, but I was meaning like, does it have a time or like a couple of weeks or,
Yeah. I don't know about
by the look, maybe by the size, by I don't know.
yeah, so yeah, I don't know about specific timing necessarily. It will start to kind of have like a stalk come out the middle of it, and it will start to flower. But usually it's when the heat starts building up during the summer that will be more likely to happen. So usually in the middle of June, I would say that would begin happening with some of your brassicas. Once the temperature starts raising in the summer. There's not really a specific time frame. I would say it's kind of hard to gauge that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Thank you for asking questions. Yeah. Is there a typical? And Devin asked, is there a typical range of sunshine needs for this family? Yeah, I would say they do need about 8 hours of sunshine a day. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think operations team, I think that's about right. They do need quite a bit of sunshine. And so during the summer, we are having those longer days. and they are exposed to more of the sun during the summer, during the early summer. Okay, I think we can move on to the nightshade family. Oops. So these are this is the nightshade. There's tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, tomatillos, and ground cherries. And these are also really heat-loving plants. They are a little bit more prone to, sorry, we just got another thing in the chat. I'm just gonna pause for a second because this is still a little bit about the bolting. Matt just put in the chat, would you recommend deadheading flowering plants, removing the flower tops to help maintain them longer for more harvests? For example, removing the flowers from the basil and cilantro to ensure they keep producing harvestable leaves. Yes, I would recommend doing that. I apologize for not explaining that a little bit further. But yes, I would recommend if your herbs like basil or cilantro are flowering to just kind of prune those flowers off, and it will help them kind of put more energy towards the other leaves that are growing on the plant. So yeah, that's a really great thing to bring up. Thank you, Matt. And it will help maintain, yeah, longer harvests too. Okay, so back to nightshades. So yeah, heat-loving plants, they are a little bit more prone to diseases, but we'll get a little bit into that. And yeah. There we go. So introduction to nightshades. So all members of this family, like I said, they need to be in frost-free weather. So making sure that you're planting them after the danger of frost. And to grow tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers in Minnesota, you will need to transplant them. So starting them in the greenhouse and then transplanting them in like usually the first week of June. And then they do not like to get their leaves wet at all. This will spread disease more so if their leaves do get wet. And like I said, there are a lot of disease problems with this family, and you will want to be planting your potatoes first thing in the springtime if you are going to be planting tomatoes. I'm not sure if we are planting potatoes at the farm or not, but that's something that we can address a little bit later on in the slide. So the nightshade roots, similar to the cucurbits, they so no potatoes again this season. So yeah, we're not doing potatoes. I'm assuming, is that because of the potato beetles, or is there another reason why?
The
Hey,
potato
Becca, yeah,
beetle.
this is Matt. It's because of the potato beetles.
Okay, cool. Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, the roots are very deep with the nightshade family, so they are able to handle longer periods of dry season. And you do want to water these deeply as well, meaning that you want to water them at the base for just a little bit longer, and so that the roots really retain that moisture from the plants. And especially with tomatoes and peppers, you want to water at the base of the plant so that you're not getting water on the leaves, because that will spread more disease on the tomato plants. And so what you can do is you can kind of prune some of those leaves on the very bottom of the plant to avoid getting those bottom leaves wet and then having those leaves get diseased and then having them spread to the other parts of the tomato plant. So that's just a little information about that. Okay, There we go. So like I said, so we don't need to know about potatoes really, but you know, if you do want to know a little bit more, we're not going to be planting them at Big River Farms, but if you do, when you have your own farm, want to plant potatoes, they will be started in or seeded in mid-April. And so those ones are direct seeded. But all the other ones are going to be transplanted. It's the only way to grow nightshades in Minnesota. And they need up to 8 weeks in the greenhouse before planting. So keep that in mind. They will need to be transplanted after the frost date. So usually I would say transplant in May. It's really, you know, it's very unpredictable in May. Sometimes you'll get a snow Memorial Day weekend or like the last week of May. So it's most safe to transplant in June, first week of June. Soil and fertility for nightshades, composted manure and cover crop residue often provide enough nitrogen and other nutrients for most of the nightshades as long as the soil has been well maintained. So like putting a little bit of compost into the transplant holes of each plant for a little bit of extra fertility, and also making sure that your soil is loose and has enough airflow is good. And then too much nitrogen will cause the plants to grow well, but they might not bear as much fruit, especially with peppers and the eggplants. And we can talk, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about soil and fertility in a different class. And then potatoes do need a lot of nitrogen. Common pests. So we were just talking a little bit about potato beetles. So yeah, this is a huge pest issue with potatoes, these potato beetles. And really the only organic method of getting rid of them is just picking them, constantly hand picking them. And it just is a lot of labor, extra labor to have to deal with them because they will just completely destroy your leaves, and it might even affect your potato plant or potato crop and make them a lot smaller. So that is a really common one with potatoes, and it's really hard to avoid this one. So we won't be having potatoes on the Big River farm, so because of this issue. And then some more common diseases with tomatoes, nightshades in general. Like I said, they are the disease family. And it is important to give these plants enough airflow, and you can put at the base of the plant some more like mulch, dry leaves, straw to kind of help prevent this from happening. And it's really common for tomatoes to get these yellow leaves. This is called blight. It's really, really common because when the leaves get wet, that's what creates the blight, and can kind of spread throughout the plant. You can remove some of those blight leaves and prune your tomatoes and kind of get rid of it that way. It's just best to not get your tomato leaves wet as much as possible. I know it's hard to avoid when, you know, it's going to happen, but it's not going to be a huge issue with your crop though. It's really common. And then this is what blossom end rot looks like with the nightshades, and calcium can help prevent the blossom end rot. And then also copper can be used to prevent the spread of disease as well. But we'll be, you know, this is another topic that we can delve further into in a different class, plant diseases and pests. I'm not going to get super far into that with this class. And then the harvest window and number of plantings. So the harvest will generally start mid-August, and then it will go until the frost. So they're a little bit more late season maturity. And yeah, and then one planting, you'll just need to do one planting, and they need the full season to mature. And then, I mean, it can be helpful to do a second planting to keep the strong production until the frost. And then just some need to know basics for nightshades. High disease potential for tomatoes and peppers, like I said. And then marketable tomatoes require staking and trellising. And then stakes can be expensive. So You want to stake your tomatoes so that they have, or trellis your tomatoes so that they have something to kind of support them when they're growing. And you can, use a stake and then kind of help guide the tomato plant up the stake by using twine or other material to kind of help them stay up, because you don't want your tomato plants kind of flopping around on the soil, because they are going to be more prone to disease if they're not staked properly. And then we're not going to be growing potatoes on Big River Farms. Like I said, you would be picking lots and lots of potato beetles, and or need to use some sort of organic spray or powder to mitigate that problem. All right, and I will just take a pause here for any questions about nightshades. We do have a question from Hatham. Do you have good luck with eggplants at Big River Farm? Operations team, do you want to address this question? I'm not sure.
Yes.
We do? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do have eggplant at Big River Farm. If you take really good care, they at Big River Farm is they yield really well, depend on what kind you're planting. But if you not take good care, then you're not gonna get it. But yeah, we do. The problem is the Colorado potato beetle. Right now we don't have potato, then they love eggplant.
Oh.
And so you have to manage the Colorado potato beetle, and it's a heavy one, but we have a technique how to do it. You get the eggplant. Last year I have like 100 plant and they produce really well. And so, but I take really good care, and we have really good luck at eggplant at Big River Farm, but you have to manage the pests.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks, May.
Mhm.
Any other questions about nightshades? Or comments?
Becca, I also wanted to add that a couple of our farmers grew potatoes off of Big River Farms land. So they had their own land separately that they'd grow potatoes on, because potatoes
yes.
are super, great crops to grow when you can. So they used the land that they had separate from Big River Farms land to grow it.
Yes, yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, we do have farmers that have their own farms outside of Big River Farms, is what Jess is saying, and that they are growing potatoes on their farmland. Yeah, I apologize. I meant, yeah, so I was only kind of addressing Big River Farms in that context, but we do have other farmers here that are also farming on their own land and growing potatoes, so great. All right, we can move on. Or we could also, I don't know if we want to take like a quick 5-minute break, because I know that this is a lot of information. So if you do kind of want to get up, stretch, drink some water, we do have a little bit more to go. So I don't know if that's what we want to do right now.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
We'll come back at 10:05.
Yep, that would be good.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are we taking a break or we can't hear anything anymore?
Yeah, Dee, we're taking a break until 10:05.
Yep. Oh, yeah, sorry, we should have put that in the chat. I think Matt did. Thank you.
ايه ده؟ المدرسة كيف الليلة؟ الشهر طول اليوم نلوم بالنهار في المدرسة. الليلة Saturday. Okay, thank you for reminding.
Oops. Okay, sorry, I was muted there for a second. Hopefully we're all kind of making our way back from our little break. So we're gonna be going through a few more crop families. And yeah, so right now we will talk about legumes. So legumes consist of the beans, your peas, soybeans, or edamame, clover, vetches, alfalfa. These are also going to be a lot of your cover crops too. So these are plants that really do feed the soil with a lot of good nutrients. And yeah, so but they're also going to be very common cover crops as well. Oops. Sorry. Okay, so a bit of an introduction to legumes. They are a good family to know because of their nitrogen fixating capability. So like I was saying, they do feed the soil with good nutrients. So they do have nitrogen fixing properties. So if you do, so it will bring more nitrogen into the soil. Used for cover crops, like I said, during all parts of the season. And they're fairly light feeders, so they don't need a ton of nutrients. They do well in a lot of different soil types. So legume roots, they're kind of fun. They're very deep, 36 inches deep, or can reach the 36 inches deep. And the top 6 inches of the roots closest to the surface have lots of hairy roots that go in 2 different directions. Here's kind of an example of what they look like. And then the pink roots, the pink lumps on the roots is where the bacteria live. And so that's what fixes the nitrogen. That's what has the nitrogen fixating properties is that. And then to direct seed or transplant. So all legumes do prefer to be direct seeded because they're quick germinators. Peas can be seeded as early in the spring as possible. They do like to have cool soil similar to our brassica family. And then the beans and soybeans will need a little bit of warmer soil, like 55 to 60 degrees. And then some people do prefer to transplant their early peas to get an early, late spring harvest. That is entirely up to you what you want to do with that, but that is an option. You don't have to just direct seed them. You can transplant early peas to get an early harvest. A bit about soil and fertility for legume family. They don't need, like I said, they need little fertility to do well, and it is a really good family to put into the rotation to help the rest of the soil, but still get a marketable crop. Yeah. And I will answer questions once I'm finished with these slides, with the legume slides. And when used as a cover crop, it is good to not put down manure or compost. because it will create lazy legume. Some of the common pests are the leaf hopper and the bean beetle. And they can just kind of spread disease by hopping from one plant to the next, and they spread a certain bacteria. But we'll touch base more with that in a different class. And then there is common blight on beans or bean rust. I guess this is a problem on our farm, but it doesn't stay in the soil very well, and it's recommended to not plant beans in the same area for 1 year. So kind of doing some more succession planting, changing where you plant certain crops. And then to kind of avoid this issue, to till in the infected area as soon as possible to control this specific disease. And then harvest window and number of planting. So fresh harvest from each planting usually lasts 2 weeks. So once they're matured, you will be harvesting for 2 weeks. You can do multiple planting of peas. Seed once in the spring, and they germinate the best in cooler temperatures. And for green beans, you can seed them every 2 weeks once the danger of frost has passed. And then the dried beans and soybeans seed once in the early summer. So you just need to seed those once, and then they'll be harvestable throughout the season once they're matured. And then some need to know basics for legumes. For the green beans, the harvest time is consuming and time sensitive. This is very true. You're going to be needing to really keep an eye. Once they're matured, they're just going to keep producing. So keeping an eye on those and making sure you're harvesting them every other day, every day, depending on how often you come to the farm. And then let's see, I know there was a question in the chat from Veda. How soon can we direct seed peas? Yeah, I would say early spring. You can, like, I would say sometime in April when the soil isn't hardened or frozen. I would say you can start working in some of those pea seeds once you kind of loosen up your soil and get your soil ready to direct seed. You can start your peas in the springtime, because they can handle some cold after the late frost. Yes. You're welcome. Thank you for your questions, everyone. Like, this is I want everyone to feel like they can engage and ask as many questions as you want. And I hope to answer them the best that I can. And if not, I can get your information down, and I can try to answer it at a later time if we don't have time in this presentation, or it's maybe something that I'm not super familiar with. I can work on answering those questions for you all. Are there any other questions about legumes? All right. So now we're going to move on to the allium family, which makes up the onions, shallots, garlic, lilies, leeks. Oh, we do have another question. Oh, comment. On average, the last frost of the season in Minnesota happens in mid to late May. So yeah, keeping that in mind. And I'm hoping to have we're hoping to have another class on kind of when to start certain plants, when to start them in the greenhouse, when to start seeds in the soil. Having more of a holistic class on that will be focused, that can be a different class as well. All right, so alliums. Introduction to alliums. They are, so onions and leeks will need to be transplanted in Minnesota in the early spring. So like we said, mid to late May in order to get a harvest. Garlic is planted in the fall with mulch or straw. And so garlic overwinters. So it's going to be planted in the fall, it overwinters, and then you'll be harvesting it kind of early summer. Or no, fall. In the fall, you'll be harvesting it. So relatively disease and pest free. They're in the ground a long time and need lots of weeding because they have no leaves to shade out the weeds. Green onions, however, can be direct seeded throughout the season. In the harvest window, a number of plantings you want to, so midsummer to late fall is the harvest window. And then one planting. So all bulb onions are transplanted except the green onions, which can be planted throughout the season. And then allium pests and diseases. These are just a few: thrips and pink rot, root rot. We won't go into super depth about that though. Need to know, so bulb onions need to be planted early in the spring. So mid to late May, and they need a place. So you'll need a place to dry your onions and garlic in the fall for storage. So proper curing is essential for long-term storage of garlic and onions. And then before we move on, we will be sharing the slides. Yes, after this presentation, we will send you the slides so that you can look them over for yourself. So don't feel like you need to memorize everything or write everything down at this time. We'll be sending you these slides after the presentation. All right, now we can move on to umbels. So this family makes up the carrots, parsnips, parsley, dill, cilantro, celery, celeriac. Yeah. Introduction to umbels. So most of these crops grow best by direct seeding, especially except for parsley, celery, and celeriac. So they're relatively disease and pest free, and most can be grown all season long with multiple plantings, except the parsnips. They will need to be planted in the early spring, and then you will be harvesting those in the fall. They have a clear taproot system that is shallow and needs consistent water to produce nice roots. So one of the common diseases is aster yellow in carrots. This is caused by a bacteria, which is passed by an insect called the aster leafhopper. I don't know. Yeah, it says that this is not a huge problem on our farm, but if you do notice this, you don't want to sell any of your carrots with this because they don't have a good taste. We can go more into depth with this in a different class, but if you do notice aster yellow on your carrots or something, you do want to remove them so that it doesn't spread to your other carrots or your other aster plants. Harvest window and number of plantings. Each planting can be harvested for 1 to 3 weeks, and parsley planted in the early spring can be continuously harvested throughout the year. And then you can do multiple plantings of carrots, dill, and cilantro. So you can seed those every 2 weeks for a continuous harvest. And parsnips are seeded once in the early summer, like I had mentioned, and parsley and celery are usually only planted 1 time. And then some need to know basics for umbels. Carrots will need to be thinned if they are seeded with the seeder, so that it gives them just enough room to grow. And you are going to want to keep up with weeding the carrots, just to allow them that airflow and that space to spread and grow. And then, like I said, you don't want to sell carrots that have aster yellow. They don't have a very good taste, and a lot of the hair, so it's going to look like a lot of hair on the roots and yellowing tops. You don't want to sell those, but I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for us. So it's just something to keep in mind. Are there any questions about Umbel family? Okay. Let's move on to goosefoot and chinopods, which are your chard, your spinach, your beets. Yeah. So an introduction to them. All of these crops can be direct seeded throughout the growing season, similar to our last family, the umbels. Chard can be transplanted early in the spring, and with proper care, it should last all season. You should be able to harvest chard throughout the season. And then spinach, yeah, spinach can be hard to germinate. It doesn't grow well in warm soils, and it does tend to bolt in the heat, like we were talking about bolting earlier in our presentation. So it's best to plant these in the spring and then again in the fall. So spinach can be planted in the late fall and actually can be, it can be overwintered for an early spring harvest. I don't know how successful that is, just without, I mean, I don't know how successful it would be to plant them and overwinter them directly outside. I've done it in a greenhouse before. I've never done it directly outside. Okay. And so, yeah, but they are very cold hardy. Spinach is very cold hardy. Harvest window and number of plantings for goosefoot is each planting can be harvested from 2 to 3 weeks, and chard can often be harvested for 4 to 6 weeks. You can do multiple plantings, like I was mentioning. Beets can be planted every 2 weeks for a continuous harvest, and chard can be planted in the spring and in the fall. Spinach, like we mentioned, can be planted in the early spring and the fall as well. So some need to know basics. Beets will need to be thinned if seeded with the seeder. So again, just thinning them out so that there's enough space for them to grow and to get some good airflow. And like I was mentioning, spinach can be kind of difficult to germinate. They do need some more cooler soil, looser soil to germinate. You can transplant them if you want, but I think it's better to direct seed them just so they can, because they're quick germinators once they do germinate. Beets and chard have multiple seeds in the seed pod. That's interesting. Are there any questions about the goosefoot or chinopod family? Okay. So the grass family, let's see, I think we do have a question. How much sun for, I am not certain about that question. If anyone from the operations team wants to address how much sun goosefoot needs.
May, might you have any idea?
Yeah. The idea about the grass, right?
We have a question about how much sun do the goosefoot family need to grow well.
The goose family. Oh, that one is it can be the example like sweet shaw. Sweet shaw, they don't like much too cold, but they like hot, and they don't like wet. They can wet in the soil, but the leaf they don't like sprinkler. If you put on a sprinkler, then they rotten the leaf. Char and beets, they like hot weather. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
yeah, Yeah, that's all I realized that, and so I seen that before. Yeah, they like hot weather, sweet shawl and beet.
Okay,
They
thank
don't
you.
yeah.
Does that answer your question, Bevan?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so for the grass family, these are what make up the grass family right here. So corn, popcorn, wheat, rice, oats, rye, sugarcane, and sorghum. These are also going to be very common cover crops as well. So introduction, this is the family that feeds the world essentially. And something about corn seed, it can rot in cold soil, but does need to be planted in the early to late spring to get a harvest. Some vegetable farms do transplant corn to get an early harvest and to help with weeds. And then grasses like oats, rye, sorghum, Sudan grasses are often used as cover crops, like I was mentioning. They do a really good job of protecting the soil from erosion, and their roots can break up really compacted soil. They also work well to smother perennial weeds like the common quackgrass and thistle. So this is quackgrass and thistles are very common weeds in Minnesota that you're going to be dealing with a little bit and just having to weed those out quite often. Harvest window and number of plantings for grasses. You can usually harvest all from one planting within 1 to 2 weeks. You can do multiple plantings of sweet corn, plant every 2 weeks, spring into the early summer. And then the other planting times sort of vary with this one. Some need to knows: if you are growing corn at Big River Farms, cross-pollination can happen if it's maturing at the same time. So just really needing to talk with your farmers and plan together. You know, it's just important in general to just get to know one another and talk to each other kind of a little bit about, you know, your plan for your plot, for your farm. It's good to just kind of, you know, connect and get to know each other in that way. And then, are there any questions about the grass family before we move on? Oh yeah, you're welcome, Ishmael. I'm very happy to be providing you guys with this information. Thank you for being here. And he said, thank you so much for this beautiful and very informative presentation, if you guys did not see that. You're welcome. And then I think this is our last family, the aster family. So beautiful, beautiful family. Aster meaning star. So a lot of the flowers here, they look like stars. A very like common asters, you know, dandelion or purple prairie, purple prairie aster, really common wildflower in Minnesota. And so the aster family makes up the lettuce, artichokes, different flowers, sunflowers, tarragon, cosmos, dahlias. So these are all different flowers. Jerusalem artichokes, daisies, radicchio, which is a kind of lettuce, a really yummy kind of bitter lettuce. So a bit of an introduction to aster. The plants are often characterized by their composite flower heads. They're cool loving. Will also be, you know, another plant that will bolt if there's too much heat. You will want to start your seeds indoors in early April for transplanting your asters in early May. I would say early May. Fertilize soil for quick growth and keep the soil moist if you're going to be growing asters. Direct seed as soon as the soil is workable, and I would say in May, probably more so than April. Start seeds indoors in July for transplanting in August for a late season crop, if that's what you're interested in. And then you can use row covers or low tunnels to protect seedlings and plants from freezing temperatures if you do start them in the spring. They do have a long taproot, but the shallow taproots will absorb the nutrients and be used to get water. So they need to be well hydrated, need lots of nutrients. They can be side dressed with compost. So putting compost kind of next to them, feeding them with those nutrients. And then for a fall crop, you can sow the seed about 3 months before the average first fall frost date. Yeah, okay. Harvest window and number of plantings for aster family is you can harvest single leaves as soon as they reach a bite size. And if you harvest individual leaves at the baby stage, leaving most of the small leaves on the plant and multiple harvests are possible. You can remove the whole plant by cutting it off or at just above the soil surface. Yeah, so flavor is best if you harvest the plants before the weather gets too hot and dry. So like we were saying with some of these plants that do both, their flavor profile can kind of change when it flowers. So hot weather can make it a little bit more bitter. And heat will also slow the growth a little bit and the leaves will become tough and bitter. Yeah, so early spring or fall crops are sweeter and flavors are better because of that cool weather. They're kind of storing more of the sugars in the cooler weather, which is really an amazing process. Freezing temperatures will stop the growth and they may need to be protected with row cover or row cover frost blanket, maybe in late September to early October. And then you can harvest the leaves frequently for fresh salads. Yeah, some need to know basics. And we were just talking about aster yellow. So this is also something that affects, of course, asters. And it may cause dwarfed yellow plants. And then yeah, one of the ways you can control this is just by controlling the leaf hoppers, which is just, I mean, it can be difficult to do that. But, you know, just trying to remove them and stuff and keeping an eye on that. And then you can also use like row cover to keep insects out. That's a really good way to manage pests. And then snails and slugs may also cause holes in the leaves for asters. And then wet weather usually increases pest pressure. And yeah, and then there's just some other diseases like these other kind of mildew. These are often caused by lack of circulation and splashing water. So more moist conditions will cause some of these more mildew rot situations. Okay, are there any questions about asters before we move on to kind of types of planting, intercropping, and companion planting? I know we're going through a lot. All right, let's keep moving forward because I want to make sure that we have time for everything. We have time for questions in the end. Yeah. Okay, so intercropping and companion planting. So when we're talking about a row, we're talking about 2 or more crops grown together at the same time with at least one crop planted. When we're talking about a strip, that means when there's 2 or more crops together in strips wide enough to permit separate crop production using machines, but close enough for the crops to kind of interact with each other. Mixed planting so that's just when the plantings don't really have a row or there's no distinct row or strip arrangements. They're all just kind of mixed together. It's also sometimes called polyculture planting. And then relay is when you're kind of planting in succession, where a second crop is planted into a standing crop. And then companion planting is a form of intercropping, but it's usually done more on a smaller scale, like a garden. So you can grow certain crops together that complement each other. I have an example on the next slide, so we can talk a little bit more about that. And then double cropping is very similar to intercropping. So for example, a spring crop of peas, lettuce, cauliflower, broccoli is planted and harvested in the early summer. And then after that harvest, the ground is cleared, tilled up, and then additional fertilizers and incorporated in the soil. And then a second crop of warm season vegetables, such as summer squash, beans, Swiss chard, or carrots can be planted. So this can help with kind of interchanging when you have your brassicas starting kind of in the early springtime, then you harvest those, and then you can put in place of that, you can put in your warm season vegetables to kind of avoid some of those issues that we have with brassicas in the heat that when they bolt. So this is kind of a method of growing that you can use. And then, so yeah, like you can think about some ways that, you know, companion planting, that you've seen companion planting in some other cultures. This has been something that's been happening. I'm sorry the picture didn't show up. But this has been a way of planting that's been around for many generations. And yeah, well, there we go. There's the picture. So this is kind of a picture of what companion planting looks like. It's really beautiful. So you can see there's like cabbage, and then you have your spring onions right here. This looks like some squash or zucchini. You can have your herbs. So it's really dense planting, and oftentimes these plants kind of complement each other with different nutrients, different ways of growing. Some will shade out the others, and yeah, it's more done in kind of garden settings, but you can do this on your farm as well if that's something that you're interested in. And I did give you guys a resource handout sheet it should be in the invite that was given to you guys, kind of more about companion planting, what plants work well together, what plants might not really work well together. So that's a little bit about that. And then, yeah, this is a little example of the Three Sisters planting in Native American culture. You know, you have your squash growing at the base of your corn, and then you have your beans that, you know, they need to trellis up the corn. So these plants are all, and this kind of gives the corn some ground cover. And then, so all these plants are complementing one another in kind of this beautiful relationship that they have. And so this has been a really common Native American traditional method of growing. And then some of the benefits are large plants can provide shade for smaller plants that are in need of sun protection. So I was kind of already talking about this. Tall plants like corn and sunflower can support the lower growing, sprawling crops such as cucumbers and peas. It can improve the plant health. So I was explaining, one plant can absorb certain substances from the soil, and then it may change soil biochemistry. It builds healthy soil. Some crops such as bean and peas, like we were mentioning, they're nitrogen fixators, so they can bring nitrogen to certain plants that are nitrogen feeders that like to have a lot more, that, you know, need a lot more nitrogen to grow well. So yeah, and you know, it helps with weed suppression. For ecosystem and culture, it can be used as pest repellents, pollinators to help with fruiting plants. It can also act as barriers or provide a home for predators and bugs, and can be used as a thinning method. Yeah, and one example of intercropping, so here's a little example, is planting radishes in a row of carrots. So the radishes germinate quickly, and then mark the carrot row, which are slower to germinate, the carrots are. When the carrots finally begin to grow, the radishes are already developed, their leaves, and are maturing really quick because they're quick germinators. And after the radishes are harvested, usually in about 25 to 30 days, extra space is available for the carrots to develop. This results in a natural thinning process that promotes good carrot growth, and it's a good relationship between the two plants. So some of the challenges with this type of planting is it can take some extra planning. There might be some space issues. If it's not planned well, there might be more competition rather than benefiting each other. It's intense management, maybe inconvenient to harvest and produce for large scale. So like we were saying, it might be done more so in a garden setting. And it might be a lot of trial and error.
Hey, Becca, we had one person raising their hand. I
Oh,
think
yeah, I could, yeah, sure,
Mm.
please,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
so if that's like group farming, like all the or mix or planting, it's not gonna affect like the taste or the chemicals reaction between all of them.
Oh, yeah, so it really depends on the type of plants that you're choosing to plant together. So like I was saying, sometimes it's beneficial for certain plants to grow together, and some don't grow so well together. So in that handout I sent to you, there is kind of a list of what plants do well companion planted together. And this is just a way, this is just a way to think about certain ways that you can plant your crops. You don't necessarily have to do it this way. This is just some ideas that we have, different ways that you can decide to grow your crops. You don't have to absolutely do it this way. It's just some methods that you can use.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your questions.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So some need to knows, just some, you need to know the family and the species, the nutrient uptake, how much water and sun. They'll need the germination rate, the spacing, the root needs, like I was saying, the friendly and unfriendly neighbors. So that's also going to be in your companion planting resource that was given to you guys. And needing to know kind of the timing of the harvest and the technique and processing of that. What are the special behaviors and characteristics of the plant? The difference between perennials versus annuals. And then pollination needs, planting zones. And then, so our planting zone is zone 4B. This is where Big River Farms is, 4B. Yeah. There we go. There we go. There's the arrow pointing to where we are. And any questions before we move on to plot planning? Okay. So now we're going to move on to we're going to transition into a different topic here. And I will say that this might seem like a lot to go over right now, and with the plot planning, if you do need extra assistance with it, I will be very willing and able to work one-on-one with you to discuss your plot plan and go over it with you. And I'm sure members of our operation team would also be open to helping you with your plot plan as well. So if we're not, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed with these slides, these next few slides. So just know that we are here to help and support you with your farm and your plot planning process. So what is plot planning? And I'm sure that maybe some of you do, some of you do probably know what this is. Some of you might be really familiar with the topics that we're covering today, and some of you might be newer to them. So it's really great to know that there's all kind of different levels of knowledge that we have here, which is really great because it can provide opportunities for us to share knowledge, exchange knowledge. So what is plot planning? It's a list of all the crops that you want to grow this year. So it's really exciting to start, to just start kind of thinking about that for this year. So we went over the crop families, and now you can kind of maybe start to think about the crops that you're wanting to grow this year. And, you know, just start kind of making a list. And winter is a really beautiful time to, you know, we're indoors, it's cold. It's nice to kind of start thinking about your farm and the crops that you're wanting, to grow, and just start dreaming about that. And yeah, really start thinking about that a little bit. And so also plot planning is where you want to decide where the crops will best fit into your plot. So at Big River Farms, I believe all of our plots are 1/4 acre or 1/4 of an acre. And so just keeping that in mind, decide when you want to have those crops for harvest. You know, only in the spring, only in the fall, all season long. These are things to kind of consider. And then decide, so you have your when, and then decide how much of those crops you want. A little, enough for your family, enough to share, you know, starting to think a little bit about how much yield you want to get out of those crops. Why do a plot plan? This is so you know. So you know what you're planting. It's really good to have a plan with your farm. When you will plant and when you will harvest, you know, this is why you want to do a plot plan. How much you need to plant of each plant, how you will plant. Will you be planting direct seeding that one? Will you transplant it? In row spacing and bed spacing? And then where exactly are you going to plant it? And then definition of terms. So plot is the land you have to grow your vegetables on. So this could be a small garden behind your house, a piece of land at a community garden, 5 acres of land somewhere outside of the city where you drive to, your own farmland, your plot at Big River Farms. That's a definition of that, sorry. So, so plot size is measured in square feet or acres. So 1 acre equals 43,560 feet squared. And just to kind of put this into perspective, World Cup football field equals 1.5 acres. And then plots of the same size can be different shapes. So as we can kind of see, like this is 1/4 acre, 50 feet by 220 foot, 130 foot by 80. So these are the plots at Big River Farms. This is a map of that. So some of them are 1 acre to 1/4 of an acre, or these smaller plots down here. So this is just kind of a map of our farm. Sorry, I can't zoom in. Hopefully you can kind of see that a little bit. So how to divide your plot. You want to be uniform and consistent with all your spacing. It's very important. And then to divide your beds into rows. So we make our beds with our tractor. It makes straight beds that are 6 feet wide. So you can have 3 row beds, 2 rows bed, or 1 row bed. So this is what an example of what a 3 row per bed would look like. So you have a row, and then you're going to have 3 plantings of what looks to be like lettuce here. 2 rows per bed. That's kind of what that looks like. Excuse me, sorry. A little bit closer together, but you still have kind of a path in between so that you can get in there, do weeding. And then this is what 1 row per bed would look like. And then spacing, so definition of spacing between plants, how far apart you want to plant each plant or seed. And then between the rows. So you can kind of see there's corn here. And then even spacing is important. You want to make sure that you're doing even spacing. Straight rows means that you can use the tractor to kill your weeds, which is really awesome. That can help you save time and money. It will really help if you are going to use the tractor. And it's just easier to water and harvest and have healthy airflow, and also just to weed by hand if you are going to be weeding by hand. Easier to have even spacing. So how to make a plot plan. So we're going to get a little bit into depth with this. With a contract, if you have a contract, you'll need to know how much of each crop do you want, and when do you want it? Do you need multiple plantings? And then plan for an extra 15% for your crop. And I guess also, before I get super far into this, I know we sent out some resources along with this as well, to help you with your plot planning process. It should be in the invite. And I can also show you guys those resources again once I'm kind of done with this. I can stop sharing and then show you what those resources are again, so you're familiar with what to look at. And then again, we'll be giving you guys these slides too, so you can go over them in your personal time as well. With no contract, basically with your plot plan, you want to know how much of each crop do you want? When do you want it harvested? Do you need multiple plantings of it? And then just understanding that plants take up different amounts of space and also produce different amounts per yield. And like I said, we have some resources and some handouts for that. There's a lot of trial and error. It's experimental. Don't get super overwhelmed with this. You're going to learn by doing. And then where will you plant each crop? For 1/4 acre size scale, organizing your plot by planting date is most effective. So moving across your plot by the planting dates lets the tractor prepare 2 or more beds at a time. And use the planting date chart to determine whether each crop is planted early, in the middle, or the end of the season. And then estimating your row feet and beds. So row feet equals the number of feet in a row that you need for a particular crop. And then you're going to want to use a yield sheet to estimate this. This might feel a little overwhelming, but I do have 2 examples of what this kind of looks like. And this is something that I can definitely go over with any of you one-on-one, because I know it can feel a little overwhelming. So I just want you guys to know that I'm going to reiterate that a little bit so that you guys are in the know of that. So say I want 125 pounds of broccoli. So approximately broccoli yields about 50 pounds to a 100-foot bed, and is planted 1 row per bed. So I need, the math is 125 times 100 foot divided by 50 pounds. So, you multiply it by the pound of broccoli that you're wanting to have, then the 100-foot bed, and then dividing that by the yield, which is, dividing it by how many pounds are typically in a 100-foot row bed, and that will equal 250 feet. If my field is 100 foot long, so in order to plant 200 row foot, I will plant 2.5 beds of broccoli. And then the same so another example with carrots, say you want to harvest 200 pounds of carrots from 1 planting. I know that carrots yield about 150 pounds from a 100-foot row, which means that I need 200 pounds times 150 divided by 100 foot equals 300 foot. So carrots can be planted in 3 rows per bed. So 300 row feet times 1 bed divided by 3 rows is, so if my bed is 100 feet long, I need 1 full bed of carrots. I know this is probably kind of confusing, I'm still kind of learning this process as well. But I can definitely go over it with you. And, we sent out those resources and there's examples in there, and all of that. So, yeah, I just don't want you guys to feel overwhelmed. And now we can kind of move into seed searching and reading seed packets. So May is going to address more of the seed searching section, and also just kind of touching base a little bit more about seed packets. Those are going to be really informative for you. Like you want to read those backs of the seed packets, because as you can see, it gives you so much information. This might be really general information, but there's so much information on the back of a seed packet. It tells you the germination, provide temperatures of 65 to 70 degrees, light soil requirements. It tells you the spacing, the harvest date, seed packets, read your seed packets. And May, if you're ready.
Becca, I think in the interest of time, I think we're gonna have to put this last part of this presentation for next weekend and add it to that class.
Okay.
We're coming to 11. And I'm sorry, May.
It's okay.
We're gonna.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, May. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do the seed searching section. We'll tack it on to next week's class, since it's almost 11.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, if you wanted to close out, and then I can just give a couple reminders for everyone on the call, and we can call it a day.
Yeah, so sorry, I went a little bit over. I only had one, the last slide was questions and thoughts. So yeah, I get kind of excited about this topic. I'm really passionate about it. So I tend to kind of go on small little tangents about certain things. But yeah, I really hope that this was informative for you all and that you can take away some stuff from this. We will be sending you guys the slides for this presentation after this. And again, if you want to do more one-on-one work with the plot planning process, please reach out to me and I will help you go over that one-on-one. I would love to do that with you, because I know that we kind of went through that pretty fast. So I want to extend that out to you guys. So yeah, if there are any questions, additional questions, please feel free to ask them right now. And I can stop sharing my screen.
This is Veda. I have a question.
Yes.
Last year, just to use it, in the garden nearby, I got seeds from Johnny Seed, but I don't have the receipts. So can I use them, or I cannot?
May, do you want to address that question?
Yeah, you can bring to the planting day, but if you bought from Johnny, you can, that's why we're gonna do seed search, and you can look for if they organic or not. Do you
organic,
know?
everything is organic.
It's organic?
Yeah. I can bring it, they're in the seed cover from Johnny's itself, so I can bring it if you're okay, but I'm not sure if I have the receipt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're gonna write into the packet. I think Becca have some pack on the seed that they write down in the middle of the crop that is kind of in the middle. They say organic, in Johnny, but the other company they have the logo in there. But Johnny, they don't have. They just write OG in there. And so, yeah, you can bring to the farm or whenever, and so we can check if organic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So bring the seed packets with you to the farm.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, May.
Yep. You're welcome.
Yeah, and like we said, we'll be doing the seed search in next week's class. We'll just start right off the bat with that. So you can have more of an idea of where to buy your seeds, where to get organic seeds from. Oh, and I also wanted to mention too, if this, maybe for a little bit of homework reflection for you guys, maybe just start kind of thinking about the crops that you're wanting to grow this season, just kind of writing down a list, reflecting on that for yourself. And, once you do the seed search, you can get kind of more of an idea of what you're wanting to grow, but just start kind of thinking about that. And maybe even thinking about if you want to put any sort of inputs in your soil, any nutrients, compost, kind of start making a list of things that you'd be interested in inputting into your soil as well.
Okay.
Good.
Anything else you're gonna say? And so I want to announce a little bit for Jazz to announce a little bit, Jazz, after
Yes.
Becca,
I'm done.
then you can announce. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. If there are any more questions, feel free to email Becca. And I can put, Becca, would you mind putting your email in the chat?
Yes.
But yeah, thanks so much, Becca. That was an awesome presentation. I learned so much. We'll be sending that presentation out in a follow-up email with the resources that Becca referred to in the presentation as well. You can find them in the calendar invite for this class, but we'll also send them out in the email following. And I just wanted to remind y'all that our next class is next Saturday. We actually have two classes or two sessions on Saturday. One is from 10 to noon, and we're going over the basics of organic farming, as well as the basics of soil and soil health. That's from 10 to 12. And then from 1 to 3, we'll have a marketing class. So learning about promoting and marketing you and your farm. And in addition to that, next week, we have your resource binders, and this is for just the land-based farmers, not for the education only participants, but for land-based education farmers, we will have a binder of all of the resources that you need, and templates for record keeping, just kind of like a everything you need binder that you can pick up either at our farm or at the food group headquarters. And so yeah, that would be ready for you beginning of next week. Again, I'll put all of this information in the follow-up email. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can either respond to that email or message Becca. But thank you all for coming and spending your Saturday mornings with us. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, thank you all.
Awesome.
Thank you, Becca.
Yeah, thank you, May.